Alright, hello, I'm not going to be there today, so I want you to watch this video. This is going to go over the next section, completing the square, which is section 5.5-4, which starts on page 341. The objective that I want you to do, we're going to be able to do today, is we're going to be able to solve quadratic equations by completing the square, and then we're going to be able to write quadratic equations in vertex form. There's a few examples here that we're going to go over first before we get to those objectives. Okay, so you can solve some quadratic equations by using square roots, because the opposite of a square root, or opposite of a square, is a square root. And remember, inverse operations always help us solve. For example, if I give you this where it says x squared, or I'm sorry, 3x squared minus 4 is equal to 68. Then what we can do is we can go ahead and add 4 to both sides, and then that would give us 3x squared equals 72. From there, you could divide by 3 to get x squared is equal to 24. Now, at this point, this is kind of like going to be their last step. This is actually after we've done everything else. Once you've got x squared by itself, you can take the square root of that, and you would be left with x is equal to plus and minus the square root of 24. Every time you take a square root when you're solving equations, you should always remember there's going to be a positive and a negative square root. Okay, and if you need more further explanation on that, I can explain that. I'll explain that tomorrow. But always remember, you should be putting plus and minus in front of those square roots. So when you're doing it like this for solving, remember plus and minus. Now we can simplify that radical, and hopefully y'all do remember to simplify that radical. If you do, it will be equal to plus and minus 2 square root of 6. Okay. We will definitely have another day later this week where we just work on simplifying radicals and remembering how to simplify radicals. Okay. But you can see here how we got that answer. Next example, I got x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 27. Now, this example, we can actually use the perfect squares trinomial shortcut, and that becomes very important because that's going to be what we need for completing the square. If we have a perfect square trinomial, we can just go ahead and say, if it's like this, we can just go ahead and say x. Take the square root of 25 is 5, and we can actually say x minus 5 squared. Okay, so you can say x minus 5 squared. And again, that's from what we've done before, is equal to 27. Now, since it's got this isolated where all you have is a square on the outside, you can take the square root, and when you do take the square root, you're left with x minus 5. Notice that just gets rid of the parentheses. And you'll have equals plus and minus the square root of 27, which we'll later find out is 3 square root of 3. Then from there, from this point, all we have to do is get rid of the minus 5. How do we do that? Add 5. So we're going to add 5 to both sides, and we're left with x is equal to 5 plus and minus square root of 27. Okay. You can further simplify that to be 5 plus and minus 3 square root of 3. Now, traditionally what I've done is this. If you give me 5 plus and minus square root of 27, I'll give you full credit on the test Wednesday. If you give me 5 plus and minus 3 square root of 3, further simplifying it, that usually adds bonus points. You might want to remember how to do that. So for completing the square, how do we get to that point where we can have the perfect square trinomial? It's actually a very simple thing to do. Completing the square just basically says you'll have like some type of x squared. You want it in that format, x squared plus 2bx plus b squared. And we want to get it to where we can go x plus b squared. So to complete the square, all you got to do is divide whatever number you have in the middle, or in front of the x, divide it by 2. So you're going to see me here, I'm going to divide negative 2 by 1. Actually, that should have been negative 2 divided by 2. And to get an answer of negative 1. Okay, then I squared negative 1 because that's my b, and I'm going to put that there, x squared minus 2x plus 1. Okay. That would allow me to factor that, or set that up to be x minus 1 squared. Notice that the sign that was in the middle is the sign that's also in the parentheses, or the sign in front of the x is the sign that's in parentheses. So for another example, x squared plus 8x blank. I want to complete the square for this. Okay, so I'm going to take the 8, divide by 2. That gives me 4. Okay, what's 4 squared? Notice that 4 will be the number that will be in parentheses. When you divide by 2, that's your number in parentheses. But 4 squared is 16. Okay, so I've now completed the square, and I can write x plus 4 squared. Okay, so using that idea, this will allow us to do solving by completing the square. You've already solved an equation that had a perfect square trinomial. Now you're going to make that happen, and you're going to solve. In the book, on page 343, here are the steps that they talk about in trying to do that. Let's just make it a little bit simpler, and let's go through an example. Okay, so for example, x squared plus 6x is equal to 27. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to say x squared plus 6x plus blank is equal to 27, whatever. What you want to do is, let's divide the 6 by 2. What's 6 divided by 2? It's 3. Okay, then square that. What's 3 squared? It's 9. Now, whatever you do on one side, remember, you have to do on the other side. So if I'm going to add 9 to the x's, I need to add 9 to 27. Then from there, I'm going to go ahead and say, well, what was 6 divided by 2 again? 3. 3 squared was 9. That's the number that goes in the parentheses. Is equal to 36. 27 plus 9 was 36. And then from there, I can take the square root. Remember, plus and minus. So I'll have x plus 3 is equal to plus and minus 6, because I was able to get an even square root. And then from there, I can go subtract 3, plus and minus 6. And if it's like this, you can actually write it out. Negative 3 plus 6, negative 3 minus 6. To get negative 9 or positive 3. X was equal to either one of those. Again, if you have questions on that, feel free to ask. Send it through Edmodo. Another example, x squared plus 4x equals 6. Okay, now notice here, I'm already starting to write my parentheses. So I'll go ahead and say x plus, because that's the sign that's seen in the middle, or in front of the x. What's 4 divided by 2? 4 divided by 2 is 2. I can put that in parentheses. But I still need to go back and square that. Okay, so 2 squared is 4. And if I'm going to add 4 to the left side, I need to add 4 to the right side. Notice signs don't change or anything. Just keep adding 4. And then you have x plus 2 squared is equal to 10. Take the square root. X plus 2, notice this parentheses just drop, is equal to plus and minus square root of 10. There is no simplified form for square root of 10. That is it. So then all I got to do is subtract 2, and I end up with plus and minus, negative 2 plus and minus square root of 10. Okay, that's completing the square. That's about as complicated as it gets. It really doesn't need to get much further. Now, notice here, this is solving. So you've got to be careful with that, because the next ones, we're going to do what is called vertex form. And in vertex form, to get it in vertex form, we don't actually have to solve. We just kind of go through the first couple of steps of completing the square. So this one is f of x is equal to x squared plus 10x minus 13. Now, what you want to do here is you got to kind of separate. The minus 13 is going to be outside the parentheses, and the x squared plus 10x is inside, because that's what we're going to make into a perfect square trinomial. That way it will look, or be ready to look like what it would need to for the vertex form. Because remember, vertex form is the x plus or minus h, close the parentheses, squared, plus or minus k. So from here, what I need to do is I'm going to divide 10 by 2 and get 5. And square root of 20, or when you 5 squared is 25. That will go in the parentheses and outside. Notice here on inside the parentheses I've got a plus, outside I've got a minus. That will always be the case. Inside you will have a plus, outside you will have a minus. Okay, so again, 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25. So I'm going to put 25 inside the parentheses and minus 25 outside. Combine my like terms. I've got here x plus 5 squared minus 38, and that's my vertex. That's all I needed. There's my vertex form, so that would be one answer. Vertex form. And then I have a vertex of -5, comma, -38. Not one I'm probably going to graph that, but at least you now know where that vertex is. Okay. Another example. X squared plus 24x plus 145. Again, separate the 145. You put the x squared plus 24x in parentheses. And this is what I usually do. What I usually do is go ahead and put plus and minus. Plus inside the parentheses, minus outside. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the parentheses under, say x, because it's plus and plus 24, I'm going to put x plus parentheses squared. And then from there, what's 24 divided by 2? 24 divided by 2 is 12. I'll go ahead and write that in the parentheses. Then I'm going to square that and write that up back on the previous step. 12 squared is 144. If I take 144 there inside the parentheses, I'm going to have that minus 144 outside. That gives me 145 minus 144 is 1. So I'm kind of able to take both steps at the same time. And it usually makes it a little bit easier. There's my vertex form. And then that means my vertex, again, this is my vertex form. And then my vertex is -12, comma 1. Again, if there are any questions on this, feel free to look in the book. Go to myhrw.com with the username hpatch19, password Mustangs. That should be on your syllabus. You can go there to watch any videos. If you have any questions, you can try to send them through me to Edmodo. Beyond that, your assignment for today, now that you've seen the video, is to go to page 345, 2 through 36 even. Okay, this is the type of practice you need. There's going to be several of these questions on the test, so make sure you understand this because you all need to be ready for the test. If you were absent Friday for the quiz, then you will take the quiz first chance we get, maybe Tuesday, or maybe we'll just go over the quiz and you'll take a double grade from the test. For those of you that were not finished, come by Tuesday in the morning or during your lunchtime. I will do my best to make sure I have it, say, graded as quickly as possible so you can keep that to study for the test. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Good luck, and make sure you work on the assignment. Thank you.